Welcome, everybody. We will start LPC in just a moment. So thanks for joining us this afternoon. Certainly we miss seeing you in person, but thanks for joining us electronically. We'll start in just a moment. Okay, Mayor Ramsey, I think we're ready to get started.
Excellent, thank you. Can you all hear me? Let me turn my volume up a little bit and see if that helps. All right, well, welcome all of you. Thank you for participating. This is the Legislative Policy Committee for the Utah League of Cities and Towns. Today is October 19th, 2020, and we are holding this meeting by Zoom. I wish I was able to see. It looks like we have 69 people on this meeting, and I wish I could see you and be with you in person. We look forward to that someday. My name is Dawn Ramsey. I serve as the new first vice president of the league and as mayor of the city of South Jordan, and this is my first time conducting this meeting, so bear with me, and thank you all for participating. Our first item on the agenda is that we need to adopt the minutes from our August 17, 2020 meeting. Has anybody had a chance to go through those minutes? And if you have any changes or corrections, please let us know. No, I can't see on this meeting.
If they could put questions in the chat box or motions, that would be great. We'll be using the chat box.
That would be great because there are now about 80 people and I can't see all of you. So please, if you've got questions, if you'd like to make a motion, we'll be monitoring the chat box. And I'm not seeing anyone that has any amendments to make to these minutes. And if there are no changes to be made, I am prepared to accept a motion to approve the minutes from our August 17th, 2020 Legislative Policy Committee meeting. All right, we have, this is going to be interesting this way. Thank you. We have a motion by Isaac Paxman to approve the minutes and a second by Katie Witt. Thank you. We also have another motion from Melinda. Thank you, all of you, for weighing in. Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes from the August 17th, 2020 LPC meeting? How are we having them vote? This is so weird. Just say aye in the chat. Everybody just use your in the chat. This is a unique way to do it.
Yeah, there we go. Well, Mayor Ramsey, this is a good way for you to see everybody who's here.
Yes, it is. It is. And so far, it is looking unanimous in the affirmative. I don't know what the threshold number even is that we have to meet doing it this way.
Yep, we're there. We're good. Okay. We're good.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you all for voting. We appreciate it. And those minutes are approved. Okay, item 2 on our agenda. As we jump in, this is shaping up to be in regular fashion here in Utah. It would be boring if we had nothing to do. That's why we're all participating in the LPC. We like to be busy, we like challenges, and we like to work on legislative issues that benefit the cities. And we will have no shortage of those this year. Turning time over now to Victoria Ashby. Victoria is going to lead us through the 2020 ULCT issue tiers. Victoria, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor Ramsey, and welcome as chair of the LPC. If you've been to the previous LPCs this year, you have seen this policy tier. And these are the tiers that we go through with our board for ratification so that ULCT staff knows what to focus our advocacy and our work efforts on. And so just wanted to remind you of these issues. The tier 1 being the top issues that we're focusing on, those that require either because of political environment or because of the impact on you, our members, and your cities that we are focusing most of our time on. Tier 2, similar second level, but also have some political concerns. Most of the time we're hearing from legislators that they're looking at these issues, not necessarily that we are pushing these issues, but we're trying to react and shape policy, and then tier 3 as well. So you will hear about some of these issues in the presentations today, but we just want to keep everyone informed of the tiers and aware of what we're working on. And I wanted to mention that we're posting this presentation. There are some links at the end. And so if you want to go back and revisit these materials or click on links, you will be able to do that from our website. So that wraps it up for the tiers. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Victoria. Appreciate that. Okay, item 3, we have a public safety update. We're going to turn time over to Cameron. He's been working quite a bit. Talk about our Love, Listen, Lead Taskforce and everything that we've done in partnership with the Chiefs of Police Association and the counties and the Municipal Attorneys Association. Cam, take it away.
Terrific. Thank you, Mayor Ramsey, and welcome everybody to LPC. Before I dive deep into the conversation on community trust and public safety, I want to emphasize something Mayor Ramsey just said. We are expecting a blitz of bills between November 3rd and January, whenever the session ultimately begins. The first few months of this year, as everybody knows, was consumed by COVID. That was at state level, local level, businesses, homes, and everyone. As a result, a lot of the deliberation around public policy on everything from public safety to land use and everything else all got a late start. As a result, we're seeing a lot of these issues now still very much in the concept form, but starting to get more specifics. As a result, one key takeaway from this meeting that Victoria will emphasize later is that we need you to start your outreach with existing and future legislators. After Election Day, there are going to be a bunch of new faces that need to understand how your city functions, the specific challenges and opportunities you have in your city, and we need to start enlisting them as allies of local government before January arrives. We'll be updating you on a bunch of different policy concepts. There will be some deliberation when Victoria takes over after me on housing, with House Bill 374 in particular. So please use that chat box liberally to voice your thoughts. So, you know, as of today, the Capitol is still closed to the public. And so as a result, all of our lobbying has been primarily virtual or in very small groups, and we don't know what it's going to look like in January. So it's critical for you in the weeks to come to have conversations with your legislators about your city, as we are trying to do as much as possible. The biggest issues that we're seeing for the upcoming session that relate to cities, no surprise, are around public safety and land use. The more things change, the more they stay the same. But this year, on the public safety front, I think we'll be at a higher level than what we've had even in recent years. So Nick, can you move to the next slide? In hindsight, I should have, instead of using a stock photo, I should have used a photo of my cousin who's a police officer. Oh well, next time. So the Love, Listen, Lead principles that the League Board adopted back in June are listed here. So ultimately, what we've been trying to do over the last few months is to find that space where we support our officers and support areas of improvement. As a result, when the board authorized the creation of the task force, 22 members ranging from elected officials to police chiefs, city attorneys, and city managers. And we've had some tremendous discussions over the last few months. The reason for the Love, Listen, Lead approach is that we knew we needed to start on the listen phase before we even got to the deliberation phase. Nick, you can go next slide. Y2 Analytics has been a key component of our listen phase. They have now finished 4 focus groups. You can see what those focus groups were on the left. And they are in the process of finalizing a statewide survey around community trust in police and racial equity. And that will be in the field as of tomorrow. So now it's a little misleading, but tomorrow it will be now. And the results will be available in November. We'll be taking that to our board meeting on November 16th, and then at some point thereafter, sharing it broadly. I want to publicly thank the steering committee that has helped fund this statewide survey. The League has funded half of it, and the rest of the steering committee include the Chiefs of Police Association, the Utah Department of Public Safety, Salt Lake City, Ogden City, the Division of Multicultural Affairs, the Utah Association of Counties, and UTA. Again, the survey will go out tomorrow. Next slide. You can see who's on the task force. We've tried to have a cross section of urban centers and communities off the Wasatch Front. It's about half elected officials, half staff. And thus far, Nick, you can go to the next slide. Thus far, the conversation, as we've started to pivot from the listen phase to the lead phase, has really focused on the officer discipline process, potential new training requirements for officers, and data collection. At this point, we have tracked more than 90 different policy ideas that legislators, stakeholders, or members of Congress have brought up. There are 27 public bill files. I was on a phone call last week where a community stakeholder told me there were in excess of 100 bills related to public safety already open in ledge research, the vast majority of those not being public. Where that number ends up, who knows, but recognize there are going to be a lot of bills and a lot of issues here. What we have been trying to do is align with the Department of Public Safety. We have been meeting in their Big Tent meeting every couple of weeks, and then our task force has been meeting in between those Big Tent meetings. The Big Tent meetings include legislators, DPS, community stakeholders, local governments, law enforcement, and others. So we'll discuss concepts there. We take them back to our task force, get feedback from the task force, and go back and forth. Those DPS Big Tent meetings are scheduled for the next couple of months, and then the session will get underway in January. If you have any specific concerns, we're not bringing any bills to you yet, but we wanted to give you this overarching perspective on where things are at. If you have any specific concerns, feel free to put them in the chat box or reach out to me at any time. Our Love, Listen, Lead Task Force is co-chaired by now immediate past president of the League, Mike Mendenhall in Spanish Park, as well as Bountiful Police Chief and President of the Chiefs of Police Association, Tom Ross. Between the three of us, we're in constant communication about all of these different ideas and proposals. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box or reach out to me at any time. So with that, Mayor Ramsey, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Cameron, and to everyone, all of you who have sent mayors, council members, police chiefs, city attorneys, everyone who is working on this. We appreciate it and look forward to great outcomes, but it's a great deal of work. It's important work. Thank you for what you're all doing. All right, we're going to move to housing and permitting. We're going to turn time over to Carson and Victoria for an update on some potential legislation on that. So Carson, Victoria, I'm not sure which one of you wants to take the lead. I'll turn it over to you.
I will go ahead and start. So just a quick update on the housing front. Nick, would you mind hopping to the next slide? For those of you who are not familiar with the Commission on Housing Affordability, it was a group that was created in statute, I believe 3 years ago now. And Senate Bill 34 was a product of the Commission on Housing Affordability. Senate Bill 39 from last year was a product of the Commission on Housing Affordability. And so this is the third year that they're meeting to discuss policy to create more affordable housing and housing affordability in general. So the commission started off in the originally every year they've had different subgroups. This year they started off with 2 subgroups, the land use subgroup and the affordable production and preservation subgroup. And then just this last week, they added another subgroup, which is rural housing focused. So I'll start with the land use subgroup. So those of you who've been in LPCs before with us this year, I'm sure are familiar with the 6 policy proposals that were originally introduced. The League had concerns with every single one of them. And the land use subgroup's focus has been on the essential nexus requirement for building and development fees. We brought this issue forward a couple times, but just to keep it on your radar, this would be some sort of requirement that building fees are either aligned directly or there's cost accounting or some method of aligning building fees or development fees with the cost of the service. Now, case law dictates that that's the case anyway, but the group has been working on a format for that. My understanding is that I'm not sure that there's been any progress on that front, and I believe it'll be taken to the whole Commission on Affordable Housing for a vote. If consensus is not found, it may just be run as a separate bill apart from the Commission on Housing Affordability. Now, there's been talk in that group as well about a concept that would authorize inclusionary zoning, but tie it to density bonuses and limitations on design standard requirements. The discussions thus far have been that still needs some time to formulate, and likely will not be ready for this year, but should be on your radar anyway. Moving on to the affordable production and preservation subgroup. This group has 3 working groups within that subgroup. The first is landlord tenant reforms. The group is working to find consensus on policies that would improve the relationship between landlords and tenants and provide what the group believes to be an even footing. The second working group is for financial assistance. This group is designed to create incentive or assistance programs so that landlords, so if somebody's on the verge of losing housing, it'll give landlords the ability to keep somebody in that housing and cover their immediate costs. And so that group is working away as well. And then the one that I want to focus on from this group is the third group, which is on affordable production and, or no, that's not right. I miswrote the group's name, but they've, that group has discussed the idea of a housing reinvestment zone. This was new as of last Tuesday, I believe it was. So there's still not a lot of details out yet, but the idea would be to provide some sort of tool for local governments to incentivize and produce affordable housing. There's some concepts, some nebulous concepts that have floated around, including using tax increment and using potentially modifying B and C formula. And this has been sort of tied to a public property inventory. So these are all very much in the air. We'll be meeting with Senator Anderegg and a number of other stakeholders later this week to try to figure out what this model actually looks like. But I'm sure you'll be hearing more about it as time goes on. And then the last group I want to touch on is the rural housing subgroup. This is fairly new as well. And I don't know that there's any specific agenda set out for this group yet, but the idea is to identify and try to mitigate impediments to affordable housing along in rural Utah. And so we'll keep you posted on that as the group meets and starts to discuss some of these items. We go to the next slide, Nick. Thank you. So we just want to, although as Cameron mentioned, the policies discussion have been kind of interrupted by COVID, or at least informed by COVID. And it has probably interrupted what would otherwise be a banner year for housing production in Utah. And we've seen a number of reports that are identifying that despite COVID, or even maybe because of COVID, there's been a huge surge in demand for housing inventory. And that, coupled with our previous shortage, has been challenging, to say the least. But I want to recognize all of the work that you are doing in issuing more building permits. I know planning departments are swamped trying to issue as many permits as possible, but I want to applaud all of you for your work in trying to confront this challenge, because it's interconnected with so many other issues. And could we go to the last slide on this piece, Nick? So despite the fact that we've had record numbers of permits issued this year and last year as well, there's still a general dialogue at the state level that we need to have more. We need to tackle affordable housing more seriously. And although that's more complicated and not necessarily even a complete picture of what is actually happening, it is crucial that you talk to your legislators and talk to us about what you're doing on affordable housing. And it's critical that we're able to recognize all of the work that you are doing in this time. And I want to briefly pitch Senate Bill 34 reports. Just a quick reminder, this last year, every of the 82 cities that had to comply with SB 34, you all adopted your moderate income housing plans, and you're all compliant with the first piece. We're moving into phase 2, where at the end of this year, we'll have to, every one of those 82 cities will have to provide reports to the Department of Workforce Services, kind of like a progress report, just explaining what you're doing, how it's going, what the impediments have been. The form is still being updated, so we'll keep you attuned to that information, but I just want to put it on your radar that we'll start a communication blitz in the next few weeks here to make sure that you're all familiar with what's going on and making sure that you all have the tools you need to complete those reports.
Carson, can I add one piece there? Can you go back to Tom Wright's op-ed? We've seen op-eds like this before. And a couple of years ago, there were a slew of op-eds like this one that the league responded to with op-eds of our own. And part of why the SB 34 reports will be so valuable to us is because it gives us the arrows we need in our quiver to be able to complete the narrative around housing and articulate what cities are doing and the relatively small role that cities do play. Personally, I found this quote really interesting from this op-ed about balancing impact fees with sustainable growth and the cost adding to the problem of families getting priced out of the market even with new infrastructure. Infrastructure is not free. Someone has to pay for infrastructure and someone has to pay for the ongoing cost of infrastructure, and finding that balance is critical. And a lot of the proposals that we've heard over the last few months really aren't trying to find that balance. They're just simply trying to shift the costs. And so we will be working to complete the narrative around infrastructure and complete the narrative around housing planning, particularly as Carson pointed out, the record number of housing starts that we've seen over the last couple of years around the state. But we will need your help also as you're meeting with legislators. This also comes down to that fundamental issue of respecting the role of local government and what we have to do to provide those services and infrastructure for residents both today and tomorrow. So I just wanted to emphasize that key point. And Carson, I think it segues nicely to the other report the legislatures required from House Bill 374 last year. Oh, we have a comment. This is exciting. Paul, can the league also highlight the role of material costs, realtor commission developer fees, et cetera, in the housing cost issue? So, Paul, we've chuckled internally that there ought to be some sort of transparency requirement for the entire price of housing. And so if our local government fees are a certain fraction of that, well, then let's look at everything else. And then we can point out that at least for the fees that someone pays for a new house, at least you're getting a connection to the sewer for it. And that's kind of a big deal. So this is something that is certainly on our radar. And so thanks for bringing it up. And then Paul, I ran into your son and daughter-in-law and grandbaby yesterday, and your grandbaby's very cute. So personal note.
Can I also add on to that comment that the Commission on Housing Affordability, has 3 local government representatives on it. Andrew Johnston, a council member in Salt Lake City, Chris Condi, a council member in Lehigh, and Matt Dahl, the assistant city manager in Midvale. And all 3 have been excellent advocates for local government in identifying the root of the housing problem. When the issue of cutting fees has been brought up repeatedly, they have consistently pushed back with the question of how do we actually, how do you prove that this reduces cost? Local governments can subsidize housing, but that doesn't do any good if the house prices continue to rise because of market demand. So that's I'd like to give those 3 recognition as well. And Dave and Ashley Spatafor have been on the Commission on Housing Affordability and working on this issue too.
Carson, will you acknowledge West Jordan Mayor Dirk Burton's comments here? Because I think this fits into what Paul was saying too. It's in the Q&A, if you can see it.
Yes, I just saw that. Yeah, thank you, Mayor Burton. That's also an excellent comment. I mean, modern, newer houses are usually larger because the market expects that. I recently purchased a house that is 900 square feet and has a furnace that I just discovered doesn't really work very well. So I think there's a significant difference in modern amenities, and there is certainly a cost that the market expects, especially when you have much of the job growth that we've had has been in higher pay fields, and people are moving from California, from Seattle, from New York, and expecting more amenities in the housing they purchase.
All right, thanks, Carson. Nick, if you would go on to the next section, thank you. Let's see, 1 slide up, 2 slides up. HB 374. So speaking of all of your overburdened permit review.
Go the other way.
Yeah.
Go the other way.
I'll just keep talking.
It's
I know
only
he'll get
going
there.
one way. Sorry, I'll get there.
Speaking of our burdened permit review, municipal staff, we want to make another push for HB 374. So HB 374 The original bill said that if a city did not meet statutory deadlines for their own plan review and building inspection, the developer could then employ their own reviewer and inspector. And through the help of our league family, we were able to negotiate a substitute bill to that, which required cities to report on whether or not they are meeting the statutory deadlines for building inspections and plan reviews. So that reporting period was started April 1st, which I know nothing was happening April 1st this year, but the reporting period started April 1st and ended October 1st. And the reports were to come into us, and then we are required by statute to report into the Business and Labor Interim Committee. Although every city is required to submit these reports, we focused on the 82 growth cities, which also happen to be the SB 34 cities. So you're just really special if you keep growing, you also get to keep reporting. We've done multiple outreach to those cities. We put in Friday Facts. And we are now at the very end of our ability to collect these reports. So we are making a plea to get those reports in this week. This is our last chance. We have had less than half of those 82 cities report, and we really need your help. So Nick, if you go to the next slide, we're going to give gold stars to the cities who have reported, who have, as of about 10 a.m. this morning, have completed reports for HB 374. So a big, big gold star on your foreheads to all those cities who have completed those reports. If you are not on this list, and in particular, if you are one of those 82 cities from SB 34 and you haven't reported, please send those in. Spencer Kelly, our intern, has been working on this diligently. We will have Spencer's email at the end. You can reach out to him, you can reach out to me, and if you have any questions, but we really need those reports in this week. Nick, if you'd go to the next slide, that would be great. And here's why we need this in. So yes, this is a question from Paul Larson. This is plan reviews, not zoning. The reason why we need this is because of the original purpose, the original language of HB 374 before we got it substituted. The building community is arguing that cities are not complying with the law, or they're creatively interpreting the law to drag out approval deadlines. And we are anticipating legislation to diminish or strip cities of their plan review and building inspection authority. And when we don't have these reports in, it's hard for us to go back and advocate for you to the legislature that this authority shouldn't be changed. And so kind of question we want to put towards you, and feel free to put your thoughts in the chat box, is if there's concern about preserving plan review and building inspection authority. There may be some attitude that turning this over to the private sector and letting the builders contract their own plan review and building inspection is fine. On the other hand, there may be concern about self-dealing, having the building inspectors contracting and basically being the ones who are overseeing those inspections. So we're just curious to see what the, kind of the temperature is out there, because we are anticipating this legislation this session, and without kind of a more robust group to report on, although hopefully you will all get in your homework assignments this week, it's hard for us to go back to the legislature and give them a clear picture that, yep, cities are meeting these statutory deadlines. What you're hearing from builders is really anecdotal and not accurate. So any thoughts that our members have about that, we'd love to hear from you.
Really what we need to know is how much political capital should we spend fighting to preserve this authority, based on the reports we're getting. So it'd be watching the chat box anxiously here, or the Q&A, or even my phone, because people love to text me during these meetings. But we need to know how much you want us to keep fighting this. Oh, thank you, Mayor Burton. An exclamation point, no less. So perfect, Jen. Thank you from Salt Lake's perspective. Paul, the online reporting form. Victoria, I'll let you address Paul's point, but I'm pleased to see some comments coming in here too.
We had, for those 82, we had created a template to help you report in. We know that a lot of cities have their own in-house software that can do this, but we were trying to find a uniform way for us to collect the data. And so if you want to email Spencer, again, his email will be at the end. He would be happy to send you that form and help you work on that.
Victoria, can you address Valerie's 2 points? One was just a comment, but the other was the question on private reviews.
So Valerie asked, most cities are already allowing private reviews and inspections, aren't they? And I honestly don't know the answer to that. I think that the statute would allow that, but it also allows the city or the city to hold on to that authority. So I don't know the threshold of how many cities are doing that necessarily. But yes, Valerie, the original bill basically took away the city's authority to keep the authority in-house. And it looks like Jennifer Bruno responded that Salt Lake City does allow those, but the contracts, in terms of the contracts, are managed and controlled by the city.
And then Victoria, I see comments from Farmington, Highland, West Jordan, and I think we've referenced the other ones, but who've all chimed in as well about the importance of this.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point that the private industry that cities might contract with are swamped too, which just goes back to the point that we're having a record year of permits approved. So, you know, it'd be interesting to see if this bill did push through, if it would really change much. And I think one of the arguments from the developers is that where cities are doing in-house, they're misreading the statute. They are not really understanding, you know, what is entailed in a plan review to meet those statutory deadlines. So we need to be mindful of that.
Victoria, did you see Gary Crane's comment? And then I've also seen, Meg, good point. There have been several comments that have just come to us and others that have come to everyone. So I mentioned Farmington and Highland. North Salt Lake has chimed in. They believe it's a consumer protection issue and therefore critical. And then Victoria, will you reference Gary's comment?
Yeah, so Gary said right now the cities are responsible for employing additional help. The developers want that authority. They would also want our fees to be reduced proportionally. And yeah, the fee issue plays into a bigger theme we're seeing again for this session, which is putting a microscope on municipal fees. So it looks like, I mean, from what I'm seeing, there's concern about handing this authority completely over to private industry and whether that would even resolve the issue of timeliness.
That's what I'm seeing as well. So we will make sure to follow up with the cities that have not yet submitted these reports, and because we do anticipate the legislature asking for them in the days and weeks to come.
I will invite Cam to tell them that things are stupid. So Cam has more weight than I to tell people that they're stupid, but I'm sure Cam can figure out how to politely paraphrase that. And then Lynn Pace said the issue is not so much whether or not private inspections should be allowed. Most cities already allow that. Salt Lake City does. The bigger concern is removing local city authority to protect the public safety in this process. And I think that is the concern we've heard a lot, thank you, Lynn, about a consumer protection aspect of this, whereas the developers see it as a revenue protection.
So in sum, thank you to the 39 Gold Star cities. For the rest of you, we do not want to be in a position where we have to play defense with our hands tied behind our backs. We need your help so that the data can help us defend you. Otherwise, we get caught in a game of chicken and nobody wants that. So Carson and Spencer will be following up. So please make sure you submit that information to us.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I think we can move on to the next agenda item.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you to everyone for your feedback. I'm trying to keep up on reading all of the chats as well that are coming in. I wish we could have this conversation in person, and eventually we will. In the meantime, be watching. If your city is not one of them that has submitted that, please be watching for information from the league requesting that. There's help available, but it really is going to be critical to the greater good for all of us that we all get those in. So thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to item number 5. CARES Act third tranche funding update. We have Wayne Bradshaw, who's been working very hard on this, as has Cam, and many people have been working hard on this. This is going to be good news for some and probably a little bit frustrating for some. So with that, Wayne, I'm going to let you take it away.
Thanks, Mayor Ramsey. So first I want to talk about the third tranche for cities and towns outside of Salt Lake and Utah County. When we first negotiated this distribution from the state wanted to do it in 3 tranches. That way, on the third tranche, if there needed to be made adjustments for increased COVID cases or other data that we learned through this process that would require a change in that formula, that has always been on the table. So what I'm going to talk about is the change that is going to be in the third tranche. So the third tranche will be distributed, about 89% of it will still go out based on population. There is going to be an 11% reduction. So the third tranche for cities and towns is 35 million. We're going to take 3.8 million of that and redistribute it to our disparate impacted communities. So again, everyone should see almost a full third tranche based on population, but there'll be an 11% taken off of the top. That 11% is being redistributed to a small number of communities, 10 communities across the state. And then all funding, once we have a date in which the third tranche is available, we will send that out via email. Watch for that in Friday Facts. But you have to access all of your funding from the state by November 6, 2020. The first tranche is available now. There are about 20 communities that have not accessed the first tranche. You can access that by going to GOMB's website and filling out the Coronavirus Relief Fund allocation. The second tranche is currently available, and you access that by completing the survey sent to you by Taylor Kaufman with the Governor's Office of Management and Budget. There are about 30 cities and towns that have not accessed the second tranche. So like I said, the third tranche is going to become available. And if you want to access your money, you need to start going through the process now, because once November 6th hits, they're going to cut off all access to the third tranche, and that money will be reallocated for vaccine preparation. So cities, towns, outside of Salt Lake and Utah County, access your money now, and we will follow up how you need to access the third tranche and what that process is. So Salt Lake County, we are continuing our conversations with the county and the mayor's office about the third tranche. The mayor's office is working towards having more information available by October 30th. They are looking at how much money is still available, and then determining the highest and best use of that money. The mayor has communicated, Mayor Wilson has communicated that the priority is the public health need, economic stabilization, and then what she refers to as city, town, and county budget backfill. And so we will continue to engage with Salt Lake County, and as more information becomes available, we will let you know. But the big takeaway is for cities and towns outside of Salt Lake and Utah County, you need to access that money, because when November 6th hits, you will no longer have the availability to get those funds.
Okay, thank you, Wayne. If I can chime in here just a little bit, in behalf of the board, I'd like to just let all of you know how much work went into this from the board. A lot of discussion, lengthy discussion with a variety of perspectives from across the state shared. people told the stories of what their communities have experienced, and it was a healthy discussion. And the decision wasn't made when we originally thought we would make it as to what we would recommend as a proposal, because it took more thinking, more evaluation, more time for all of us to come together. But this 11% distribution to disparate communities and 89% of the third tranche by population to everyone outside of Salt Lake and Utah counties is something that the board has all agreed on and feels good about. Those of you who are like me from Salt Lake County and hoping that we end up seeing any kind of money from a third tranche, please know we're also working on that. We appreciate the relationship that we have with Mayor Wilson's office, and that we recognize that the money that we've received, she wasn't obligated to share with us, but we really appreciate that she has, and we will continue to work with her and her office to hopefully be able to provide some sort of a third tranche to the cities in Salt Lake County as well. Anyway, just wanted you to know this has been quite a process, and it continues to be. We will keep working on this, and we'll work tirelessly to do what we can to try to create equity amongst all the communities around the state. We've been impacted differently, but we're working hard to make sure everyone is taken care of the best they can be. So thank you to the staff and to the board and to any of you out there who have been part of working on this with us. Thank you. Okay.
Mayor Ramsey, can I jump in here real quick?
Please, Count.
We are in a tremendous position compared to other cities and towns and counties around the country, because when it's all said and done, based on our discussions that we're having with legislative leadership this week around that third tranche, and then the money in Salt Lake and Utah counties, we will, at the end of the year, I shouldn't say will, we should be at the full 45% of the CARES Act funding going to local governments. That is not the case in most of the states around the country. And so we have been successful at pushing those dollars either from the state level down to counties and cities, or even within Salt Lake and Utah counties of pushing those dollars down to the city level. For example, in the state of Georgia, just last week, the Georgia legislature had set aside dollars to share with local governments, and they pulled the carpet out from under local governments and said, never mind, we're keeping this money at the state level. And there have been horror stories like that my counterparts have shared with me from around the country. And right now we are on track to share the full 45% that Congress authorized that could be shared with local governments. We're on track to share all 45% with it. And there are still these unanswered questions in Salt Lake County. We have been pushing since day one to ensure that there would be dollars available for cities going all the way back to April. And we've successfully accomplished that with the equivalent of the 2 tranches thus far. And then, as Mayor Ramsey said, we've had multiple board discussions on both the state funding as well as the remaining Salt Lake County funding. And so, the state funding, make sure you apply by November 6th. And on Salt Lake County funding, we'll be discussing this further at the Conference of Mayors on Thursday, and continue to have that dialogue to ensure that cities in Salt Lake County, as well as cities around the state, have access to these necessary funds so you can spend them before that December 30th deadline.
Thank you. In response to Lynn's question in the Q&A, I received an email during this meeting. I got an email from Mayor Wilson's office that says tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., Mayor Jenny Wilson and Deputy Mayor of Finance and Chief Financial Officer Darren Casper will be sharing the mayor's fiscal year 2021 Salt Lake County budget plan and strategy that continues the county's response to COVID-19. The mayor will detail the health and economic recovery measures necessary to strengthen and rebuild the community in the coming year and outline the budgetary priorities for continuation of vital county services. So while I realize that that is a budget, proposal that will be coming out, no doubt this will be taken into account, especially the distribution of the vaccine, which is what I know she's the most concerned with having enough money about. So I anticipate maybe we'll learn a little bit more tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. as to what they've put together. So you can be watching for that. Anyway, there's that. Okay, unless anybody has anything else specifically to say to this, thank you for the inordinate amount of work that's gone into this so far, and we'll keep working on it. Coming up next, item number 6, we have CRA legislation discussion. And with us, we have Victoria, and welcome to our friend Nick Dirksen from Sandy City. Nick Dirksen, thank you for being here with us. We're going to turn the time over to the two of you to discuss this potential legislation.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Nick, for joining us. As we get closer to the legislative session and work through the interim, we are trying to reach out to the various groups that work with cities. Cam has been working with the Police Chiefs Association and on Listen Lead, and now we've invited Nick to let us know what the CRA group is working on, and we really appreciate him bringing this to us. And we're trying to encourage other groups to bring their legislative ideas to LPC so we can get a good venting and also provide them good feedback as they head into session. So thank you, Nick, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Victoria. It's a pleasure to be here. I know time is limited, so I will push forward. This bill is something that the LPC saw last year. It's proposed from Senator Harper. It was known as Senate Bill 163. Due to its complexity, we were late getting it there, and the LPC asked us if we would keep it in the interim and then bring it back at a future date. And so that's what we have here. The amendment is in response to affecting redevelopment activity across the state and the development of preferred CRA participation policies by various taxing entities. The proposal would allow agencies to become a taxing entity through a structure that would utilize the assessed new growth within a CRA project area at its expiration and as negotiated with the taxing entities, and to capture that growth and then apply it. The purpose of the bill is to provide a kind of a stable funding source to implement a municipality's goals and community and economic development objectives without requiring new taxes, and also lessening the CRA request burdens that taxing entities now see. The proposal would provide an enhanced tool for communities and economic development, focusing on neighborhood and community reinvestment, while still allowing agencies to create traditional CRA project areas as needed in order to capitalize on significant economic or regional benefits. So the couple of policy implications. First of all, this option is purely optional. Any entity can opt in. It's primarily utilized by the government entity creating the agency, but other taxing entities may also opt in through an interlocal agreement. If the option is utilized, then the new entity would continue to operate and carry out the same agency functions as defined in 17C of the state code. For those cities and even unincorporated county areas that opt this path, they need to create a CRA project area. The need for creating CRA project areas for community-based and localized development would be eliminated. Again, the purpose for those would be solely for the idea of regional and or significant economic benefit projects. The other thing through this path that the bill provides is it eliminates requests for taxing entities to participate in community-based localized projects. And again, it does allow you to still do those regional ones as needed. The other option in this is if you go down this path is that you cannot request extensions of project areas. That's one of the things you would give up by taking this option. Through the creation of a plan, this option provides kind of stable, long-term, community-based, but also citywide economic development projects. Where a traditional CRA is not practical or plausible, this provides an additional tool for those local economic projects. Traditionally, they'll be quite small. This will allow a city to do projects when the immediate need arises, and they don't have to wait for an entire area to be redone and therefore creating a project area. So it allows for greater agility for a city to do community-based projects and utilize this tool as they create the project area. They can also can do any size or shape throughout the city, and they're not going to be reliant on utilizing tax increment from a taxing entity because it's done through another mechanism. The city still maintains the oversight and the operations and the administration, just like the current project areas have. That doesn't change. We believe this provides for greater transparency, greater assessment, collection, and and responsiveness. This also removes the perception that CRAs are impacting the budget of other tax entities. And we believe that on community projects, school districts, for example, will no longer have to be in the middle of decision-making when it comes to participating in a project area. The other advantage here is that they still have the opportunity to reap the rewards of the increased tax base or the growth in that area. Each tax entity that levies a property tax under this option will enjoy immediately the addition of that new growth, and they will no longer have to wait for a project area to sunset in order to see that new growth. So that's one of the other immediacies that it provides. Some of the process and some of the considerations that we looked at in this is that first, you would have to create through interlocal agreement a tax entity for the agency to participate in this option. And then as a project area expires, and I'll admit it's a complicated math, but you would convert that growth, that negotiated growth with the taxing entities that are looking to participate into a creation of an initial tax levy. Now, it would also be handled by, that growth would be an offset and a reduction in the tax rate of the city so that it's net neutral as it moves forward. And then this transition would allow the city to establish the initial tax rate, and as those project areas expire, you have the option of adding those in through that interlocal process. But the initial one would allow you to create this base without having to go through the truth and taxation process, at least the initial one. And another thing that's important here is that in consideration of the tax rate, the agency would, again, no longer look to create CRA project areas for community-based projects that don't have any kind of significant or regional return. So it would eliminate, therefore, the amount of requests from the taxing entities. An agency can still pursue those regional ones as warranted and as taxing entities want to participate. And then if you have a project area that has affordable housing or other prescribed earmarks, those remain in place, and they remain in place for the life of the project area. At the time that you look to maybe convert to this option, you can then look to add those provisions, whether it's affordable housing or other prescribed earmarks, as part of the creation of the rules under which the tax entity is created. So it is complicated. I want to give a shout out to last year Legislative Council, who did an amazing job writing the language for this. In 30 years, I have never seen a more complicated bill written so well. I really give a shout out to their work on this. Again, this is an option. It doesn't work for every city. It doesn't work for every taxing entity. And it's really just providing an additional option for doing economic development. But again, Senator Harper's intent here too was to respond to the policies that were being adopted by tax entities as far as their preference when it comes to participation, but also recognizing that sometimes when we create these RDA project areas, the tax entities are put in the middle of economic development decision-making, which can be uncomfortable. And we were looking for a method to do that and deal with those issues, as well as the option of providing a stable environment, as we don't know exactly what happens with redevelopment or agencies over time. For cities, this is an opportunity to provide an ongoing, stable way of financing in a very transparent way, economic development in the future. So I'm happy to take any questions. I've tried to make this quick at Victoria's request, so please send me any questions you have.
So I'm glad you're happy to take questions because we have a few, Nick.
Okay.
First, Mayor Hill asked if there was an outline or materials on this. Is it the same bill from last year, or is there going to be a new draft that we can expect, and that would help the LPC to take a stand on it?
It's the same bill as last year. We haven't made any significant changes. I will tell you, we've presented to the Taxpayers Association, obviously the LPC today, and there could be changes, and we expect to make changes as we get feedback. The real key to this bill is feedback. We are hungry for it. We would love to get the feedback and suggestions. our mistake last year was too late in the game, being so complex, and trying to get that feedback was just too short of a time frame. That's what our hope is this time.
And what was the bill number last year so people can look it up?
163. And if you, whoever represents your city on the URA, the Utah Redevelopment Association, we will be having a meeting here soon where additional resource materials will be made available.
Great. Paul Larson asked, if we give extensions, is there an inducement for other taxing entities to play ball?
Wait, say that again.
If we give extensions, is there an incentive for other taxing entities to play ball?
There could be. I think that's the reason we like the option of this, is because not everyone is. I was talking with one county who this option in their county may not work really well, because ironically, it's the school district that requests the most creation of CRA project areas. So they're happy with the existing process. And they're happy to do extensions. So I think that's one of the things we like about this being optional, is that not every county, not every city is in the same boat and has the same objectives. And this provides them to accommodate this wherever it works best for them.
Great. Jennifer Bruno asked, this would seem to lead to less investment in communities. Right now, the county and schools can opt into investing in communities. It would seem that only the new city rate would be part of it.
I haven't had that observation before, but I would like to see more about what she's explaining there, because that's the kind of feedback we're looking for.
Okay, and we can send all this on to you.
Sure.
Her other question is, what evidence is there that this new path would result in fewer requests? It would seem that an additional tool would result in more requests.
Well, the reason we believe, those have been doing this for a while, we would believe that it would reduce the request is because right now, unless you have a significant area or a significant regional kind of project, it's hard for the tax entities to participate on smaller project areas. And so it would then, because you've done this option, you don't sit and wait for an entire area to go into a circumstance of redevelopment and then try to create the project area. You could deal with it immediately. Therefore, you've reduced long-term the ability to have to maybe create that project area, because you've been able to handle it now through this kind of taxing entity participation. That's kind of those of us that have been doing this for a while recognize how this could help us meet the need quicker and not have to wait for it to get so bad that now we have to create a project area and the investment has to be larger.
Great, and just a couple more questions or comments. Lynn Pace in Salt Lake City said, I think I just heard you say that before implementing this tax levy, the city would have to reduce its existing tax levy in order to be revenue neutral. If that is the case, what is the advantage of this separate tax levy if it is just reallocating existing revenues? Doesn't this proposal in effect just allocate an existing portion of existing revenues to redevelopment?
Let me clarify that. If that's what I understood, I'm sorry, that's not what I meant. What would happen is when a project area sunsets, there's new growth that comes to a city. And the idea is that you would capture some of that new growth, not the existing levy, the new growth. And rather than converting that new growth into the general fund as it currently is, you would take all or a portion of that through negotiation with the agency and convert that to a tax rate that would be captured by the agency. So it would be only the new growth. It wouldn't be any of the existing rates or existing capture that you have as a city.
Great. And then Jennifer Bruno, again, has concerns that this would seem to be a revenue loss. Is there a financial analysis that you've done or could share? And Carson has shared in the chat box the link to the bill. So this will give everyone a chance to look at it, and then we can bring it back next month for potentially a position from the LPC. And then Mark Christensen said, not all cities are interested in more CRA changes. Why not a few years with no CRA? Asked from the economic development staff. So yeah. There you go.
Yeah. Now, we would encourage cities as they look at this bill because we've done some preliminaries, and and they're not all the same. This bill works differently depending on the city. And the reason is because of things such as coterminous boundaries with your school district and other kinds of variables. The math on this can be rather complex, and we would encourage cities to as they look at this, to evaluate it based on their own city. Because like I said, this is not for every city. Some cities, this is going to be a great tool. Some cities, the current CRA standard works really well for them. And we're not looking to replace anything. It is simply an option.
Thanks, Nick. And we'll share these questions that you've had with you. And then I think it will give an opportunity of our members to look at the bill over the next month. And then we can bring it back next month. Hopefully you can take a deeper dive into some of the questions that have been asked and address those. And we can potentially have a discussion on how to proceed during session.
That would be wonderful.
Victoria, can I ask a follow-up question? So Nick, before you're off the hot seat there, you mentioned that you'll have some materials for the RDA Association. Will you share those materials as well as with us? Because there have been several questions ranging from fiscal analysis to just some sort of visual about how this process would work. And so
Sure.
Before we could take a position, people need that information.
Yeah, we will do that, of course.
Now you can leave the hot seat.
Thank you. Appreciate the time.
Okay, thank you, Nick and Victoria, for presenting that. I anticipate we'll have a great deal of discussion on this going forward. Thank you. Okay, moving on, and for the sake of time, I'm going to introduce 7 and 8 together. We're going to turn time to Victoria to go over the Land Use Task Force, give us an update on that, and then transition straight into number 8, the 2021 general session preview that Victoria and Cam will do together.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to go through the Land Use Task Force and what it's been working on. We've presented this before. Each of these is a complicated and detail-oriented issue, so please reach out to me if you want further information on any of this. Some of the issues there are preliminary drafts on, but they're still being worked on. Others are still in the discussion stage. So we don't have the time here to get into the nitty-gritty of each of them. So I'm encouraging everyone to please reach out to me if you have any questions or want to give feedback on any of these issues. So the Land Use Task Force has been busy. The first issue they've worked on is annual land use training and whether volunteer planning commission members should be required to participate in annual land use training. There's been some concern that planning commissioners don't fully understand the law or how land use works. And so we're looking at whether or not those volunteers should be asked to do some training on that. The second issue is standards of review. The PRC initially proposed that there be a bifurcated standard of review on land use applications and to change the appeal standards. We took that to our land use home team and they rejected that. When we last met with the PRC, we asked, here's our stance. We're not really interested in your proposal. Can we drop it? But they said that they will bring back another proposal and we are waiting to see what that will be. PIDs, public infrastructure districts, at the beginning of this year, just as session ended, the PRC asked that PIDs be expanded so that they could be created without local authority oversight. And so they are still asking whether we can agree to legislation that would allow in any circumstances automatic creation of a PID without that local government review and approval. We took this to the league board today and they took a motion that they are still uncomfortable with PID creation without local government input. So stay tuned on that one. It does seem to be a priority of the PRC and we may still see legislation on it and we'll keep talking to them. All right, next one, conditional use permits. This bill is fairly simple, although there's still some discussion on it. That would be to modify the conditional use permit statute to state that a CUP must be objective. The standards must be objective. Impact fees. This bill, we do have draft language for, and I'm happy to share it if you would like. This clarifies existing statute that allows a local entity to use impact fees to pay for the impact fee facilities plan and analysis and enacting the impact fees. Right now, the way it's written in statute is almost like a double negative. And so this is just hoping to give clarification to that. authority. There was initially going to be also in this impact fee bill some language clarifying when schools would have to pay impact fees, but that is taken out of the draft at this point. 6, we have a group looking at water provider review plats. So local districts request a statutory clarification and authority for water district provider to review and approve a plat at the time of subdividing or vacating. And we're still seeing if we can find language that everyone's comfortable with on that one. The next one is annexation and incorporation, and this has spread the metaphor of the year is like a virus and has created its own very many different viruses. So, and in part because the legislature has passed, to put it politely, controversial and not very well vetted bills in special sessions on annexation and incorporation. So these groups are looking at cross-county boundary annexations, notice for annexation incorporations, incorporation boundary protections. That's basically when you have an incorporation happening, but also property owners also propose an annexation that would carve up that proposed incorporation of a city. Islands and peninsulas, and whether or not we can put a pause on the annexation code and recodify it, because it's fairly confusing at this point. First class counties are treated different than other counties, and it can be quite difficult. And yes, I see about the Who won't get fooled again, my dad's favorite band. So I'm well aware, and it does feel like that. All right, so next, the remaining issues in the Land Use Task Force is looking at, they are looking at development agreements. There's been some case law come out recently in the states that the courts have looked at some development agreements as contract zoning and have decided that those development agreements are illegal, basically saying that the city and the county, when they entered into, or city and the developer, when they entered into a development agreement, they really entered a contract to get around some of the requirements of LUDMA. And so we're looking at putting into statute clarification to deal with that case law. Low impact development, this was an issue that came up during session and Representative Snyder's bill. And we have a group that's continuing to work on that bill and low impact development and stormwater permitting. The last issue is building permit investing. There's been some confusion about where the land use process ends and the building permit process begins and how that impacts vesting. And so we have a group looking at writing language to help clarify that. And then finally, this is an ongoing issue, which is gravel pits. And Evelyn, I'd be happy to send that to you. So I will make a note to myself. It was a case that came out of Tooele. If you want to Google the Salt Lake Tribune article on development agreements, it was a case dealing with the gravel pit out in Tooele about 2 months ago. Gravel pits, speaking of which, are an ongoing issue that we are working on. The operator sent us some language during the summer. And the big issue here is that there is a moratorium in state statute that prohibits the city or county from regulating gravel pits if they did not get certain ordinances in place about 2 years ago. And so that moratorium is making it very hard for our local officials to respond to health and safety concerns of their residents who live near gravel pits. There's tension here because what those gravel pits extract are valuable resources, especially when we're growing and paving roads. And so we're still trying to work with the operators to see if we can come to language. The league has contracted with outside counsel to help come up with a draft. However, as we get closer to session, we're hoping that we can find a middle ground, but we may find ourselves in a gravel pit fight during the general session. Again, that's a fast, quick list. If you have any questions about any of these, please reach out to me and I would be happy to get you in touch with those who are working on them with us or share drafts if there is any language. All right, that gets us to, believe it or not, it is mid-October, which means we are already in the shadow of the 2021 general session. Unfortunately, we may still have special sessions come up, but everyone, knock on wood, that does not happen because it's already feeling too much like January. We just wanted to walk through some of the issues that we have been hearing rumblings about as league staff and make sure you're aware that we might see bills on this during session. And as Cam said, we are going to need your help. Unfortunately, a plague and an election year has not at all slowed down the legislature from opening up a lot of new bills. So if that won't stop it, nothing will. What we're hearing rumblings about in land use and housing are ADUs. Representative Ward is considering legislation changing the definition of relative. There's some confusion in statute right now of what a relative, meaning like a blood or family relative, really means as far as residential zoning goes, and ordinances, modifying the building code as it applies to ADUs, and financing mechanisms to help homeowners create ADUs. So he's looking at the building code, some of the fire code that's in place that applies to duplexes, and whether that should apply to an ADU where the homeowner lives in there, but also opens up their mother-in-law apartment to a non-relative family. Senator Adrick has also voiced his concern about impact fees placed on ADUs and that those may not be appropriate or prohibitive to creating ADUs. Again, we are hearing rumblings about legislation on exterior design standards and limiting local authority to regulate those design standards. We're also hearing that there may be potential legislation on fees and looking at the nexus of fees. There's been talk about about the nexus and ref proportionality. And we are expecting to probably see some legislation on that. And again, HB 374 is still lurking out there on whether or not Representative Ray will continue to pursue privatizing the plan review and building inspection process. So get those 374 reports into us. Nick, if you'd go to the next. Permitting. So last year, Senator Collimore ran SB 254, although it did not pass. And it basically says if a city fails to approve a permit other than a land use permit within 30 days, the permit is considered approved. Interestingly, this did not apply to the state, which issues a lot of permits, but we will probably see something similar to this again. And then back to fees in the auditor's office, the state auditor, Dougal, is doing an initial review of business license and building inspection fees. He's reviewing 5 cities, and it's expected that that audit will expand and asking for analysis or review of completed to set fees. So they're looking carefully to see what cities are using as their standards to set those fees and then what they are used to fund. Transportation utility fee, this one is rumbling in the courts right now, but we are hearing that there may be legislation to phase out and or prohibit transportation utility fees, despite the fact that it's still working its way through the courts. And then local referendums, Representative Nelson in, I believe, the August special session was looking at expediting the local referendum process. And we are working hard to make sure that if there is an expedited local referendum process, it still has the input of the stakeholders, those who have to run the election, but also those who are seeking the referendum. The next area that we are hearing some rumblings about, law enforcement and water. Cam mentioned that there are already 27 public bill files and potentially 100 plus total bill files on law enforcement, and so keep an eye on this. And then Wayne has been tracking our water issues, have HB 40 water loss accounting. And Wayne, if you want to touch on this real quick, you have a little bit more background on this than I do.
Sure. Just real quickly, so HB 40 last year would have required every water system to do an annual water audit and report that data to the state, as well as kind of do a audit of your audit. So what eventually passed just required the Water Task Force to review water audits and make recommendations. Representative Ballard will have another bill that basically requires every water system to have their governing body accept or approve the acceptable water loss for a system. So you get to set the standard, what is acceptable for water loss. Then if you exceed that acceptable level, you have to have a plan to deal with it. And then you report that information to the state. And then if you do complete a water audit through this, in establishing this information, they also ask that you report that to the state. So Representative Ballard is still working on that bill. It will be at the Water Development Commission meeting tomorrow. But once we have a final draft or a numbered bill, we will bring it back to this body for further review. We have heard that there is potentially going to be some secondary water metering legislation again that Senator Andreg introduces every year, but he is still having that conversation. Just as an update, in last year legislative session, or this in the 2020 legislative session, a bill gave water resources the ability to put some meat on the bones for your 40-year plan requirements. That is still being drafted, but will soon be available for public comment, and we will distribute this information, but we just wanted to give you a heads up that it is coming and that it's important that you engage in the public comment process when that becomes available.
Thank you, Wayne. The last area that we're hearing some rumblings about, we've categorized as local preemption. So Representative Harrison is looking at a fireworks bill. This would actually create additional restrictions on sale, discharge, increased fines, and ability to increase restrictions on fireworks. There's a tricky balance right now in state law about what the state regulates on fireworks and where local authority stops. We are hoping to see a draft on that in the next few weeks. Code enforcement, we've heard whispers about legislation prohibiting anonymous neighbor complaints. Some cities allow neighbors to complain anonymously. This would require them not allow anonymity, but potentially create a protected record under grandma for those type of complaints. And then emergency authority, as COVID has played out, has been kind of a hot issue with the legislature, both on the local level and with the governor versus the legislature. There have been a couple bills, one that failed in the April special session, one that passed, and we will probably still see legislation looking at limiting local government authority in an emergency. Representative Robertson last year had a bill, or excuse me, 2 years ago had a bill that required local government to conduct a market study before engaging in and produce taxpayer subsidy statement for large impact competitive activities. So the idea behind this is that local government should maybe not or have to go through several processes before it engages in an activity that is seen as competing with the private sector. And then firearms, might as well cap off the COVID year with a firearm bill. So this is a bill that Representative Malloy ran last year. It did not pass, but the most concerning part of this bill was that it allowed an individual to sue for actual damages against a local authority that adopts an ordinance contrary to legislative preemption. And we certainly have concerns about those actual damages and further opening, creating cracks in governmental immunity. So that's kind of the list of some of the things we're hearing for in session, which leads us to the next section, which is we need your help. So 2021 is going to be an interesting year. It is very unclear to us whether or not we, as league staff, or really anyone who is not staff of the legislature, will be allowed on the Hill. And I am really curious to see how we do it this year. But we will need your help. In part because, as Cam said, it may be a virtual electronic communication advocacy year. And those personal relationships are going to make a huge difference when we're reaching out to legislators. Many of you have seen this before, but this is our policy prism. This is the 3 questions that we ask when we look at a bill. Does it respect the traditional role of local government? Is it a one-size-fits-all approach? or does it respect every city's unique character? And will the bill result in unfunded or unworkable mandates? And then as we work with our colleagues at the legislature and the various stakeholders who we engage in, we always want to do that with respect, collaboration, and an eye towards the outcomes to make good policy. Nick, if you would go to the next slide, please. So the strength of the League is our members, and we are calling on the League Army to help us. In particular, we really do need your help this year. And as you've seen these lists of issues, if any of them are concerning to you, then we hope that you will reach out to your legislators. Nick, if you would go to the next. We're calling on all of you to make those personal connections with your legislators. With this election, we're going to have new incumbents, and if we'll put up a slide showing those new, those open seats, and we hope you will reach out to them and educate them about your local government and the challenges you're facing. And if you don't know your legislator, please call him or her before session. But session is a really difficult time to get a hold of legislators, and maybe even more so this year if we can't do it in person. Just to keep in mind when you're talking to your legislators, they're generalists. They pass bills from everything from brine shrimp to national parks, or what they don't want to be national parks, to education reform. So help them understand complexity of the issues that are impacting your city. Give them real examples with real implications. I think those narratives are what really stick to legislators and help them read a bill and then put it into context of what its actual policy implications will be. I also think it's great to reach out to legislators and help them understand that they govern the states, but you are governing a city, and talk to them as one governing official to another. Help them understand that you need the same tools and flexibilities to tackle tough problems, that they would also want to tackle the problems of the state. And they are buried. The number of emails they get each day is really terrifying. And that will probably be the same for text this year as people try to reach them without that face-to-face interaction. So build those relationships now so you can be the first caller text they'll recognize and answer when they're getting inundated during session. Like we said, COVID-19 is probably going to drastically alter our advocacy on this year. We're thinking of creative solutions to do that, but we really need our League Army to help back us up. Nick, if you would show the next slide, this is the slide of open seats. So this will be the potential freshman class for this year. We have the district, the county, the vacating legislator, and then the Republican and Democrat candidates for each of those spots. And those who are highlighted in yellow have been friends of local government in the past. They've either voted well with us or have helped carry bills for us, helped us defeat bills. And so we will be losing some of these, great voices for local government up on the Hill. And we need to help those who are filling those seats step in and continue advocating for local government as we move forward with this year. And again, you can reach this list with the link that Carson put in the chat box. And if you don't have someone on this list, still build that relationship with your legislator. Cam, anything you want to add to that?
So my hunch is that everybody is pretty exhausted after seeing the list of all of the bills that are coming. Because so many of those are in concept form, there's no way for us to put them into our bill tracking software. That's why we felt like we needed to give you the full rundown of the different issues that are circulating out there. Many of the issues that Victoria presented are things that we'll just have to oppose, and we will successfully fight against many of them. Some of them are issues that we are proactively pursuing. Regardless, we're going to need your help and your engagement, because 2021 is going to be such a bizarre year up at the Capitol. Nick, will you go to the next slide real quick? So Victoria outlined all of the bills and the concepts that are out there. If there are specific things relevant to your city, by all means, talk to legislators about those. But here's really the 3 key takeaways from today. This is the immediate homework. And I'll turn it back to Victoria to do it. But my last comment is, every time there's an election, we lose a lot of friends at the Capitol, and we have to start building relationships with new friends. And because of the unique nature of 2021, we may not be able to do a local officials day. We may not be able to have LPC at the Capitol. We may not even be able to have some of you join us at the Capitol. So it's going to be critical that in these next few weeks, that you're reaching out to legislators, and we're having the multi-way communication between us as staff, you and legislators, so we can be as effective as possible for you in the wintertime.
Thanks, Cam. All right, we've got quick homework and then we'll wrap up. So HB 374, again, get those reports in. If you're not a city that has already reported, we want to put a gold star on you. So please contact Spencer. His email is right there. He can help you with questions, provide you the form, and we need those in this week. Again, please contact your legislators, build that relationship before session. It's really hard to do that during session, especially when we're facing big bills that have significant impacts on cities. And, talk to them about understanding the respect of the role of local government versus the state, which is their jurisdiction. Our jurisdiction is local government and those local issues, focusing on outcomes that can respect those roles and serve their communities, because they not only, although they work on the state level, they really are voted in by the city citizens in their districts. And collaboration between local and state leaders that creates solid policies on land use, law enforcement, and other municipal services. That when we work together and we work through these thorny issues, we have better outcomes and better policy. And then your final homework assignments are for the CARES Act, and I will let Wayne touch on that one.
Yeah, thanks, Victoria. And so, like I said in the earlier presentation, it's important if your city is outside of Salt Lake or Utah County, that you access the funding that is available to you from the state. The first tranche, you can fill out the GOMB website application. The second tranche, you should have received a survey from Taylor Kaufman. If you have not, you can email him at the email provided. And just make sure you're reviewing the guidance that is available to you on how you can spend those funds. The last bullet point is clear guidance from Treasury that you can use these funds to cover public safety expenses, and that you can assume that your public safety are substantially dedicated. And the only record keeping, again, review the guidance, is the payroll expenses. There's not additional tests or analysis that's required. So if you have not seen that September 21st guidance, make sure you take a look at that as you consider how your community spends CARES funding. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, Victoria. We appreciate that rundown, and brace yourselves, my friends. It's shaping up to be just like it always is, which is what we love about this job, right? Thank you all. We are on our last item. Thank you for sticking with us. Those of you who have made it here with us this long, we appreciate you being here and look forward to working together in whatever form that looks like during this next session. And with that, I am prepared to accept a motion to adjourn. If you'd like to move to adjourn, I would love to have you mention that in the chat. Okay, we have a motion by Mayor Hale and a second by Mayor Overson. I'm going to say all in favor of adjourning, and I'm not going to ask you to type aye or whatever. If you don't want to adjourn, you can let us know. Otherwise, we're going to assume this is an aye, and I'm going to say thank you all for being here with us, and hang in there. Look forward to seeing you all soon. Thanks. Bye.